Isn't it fascinating how last week everybody was talking about Bittensor, many crypto influencers were pushing up the token, and now everything is over. Nobody's talking about it anymore. Attention is declining. And the issue is there is correlation between attention and price. When nobody is interested in a token, it tends to go down in price. Is this potentially an opportunity? Let's have a look at the data most people are not considering. Now, very long term, there is a bit of a tailwind for Bittensor, and that's the token inflation. Over time, there's more and more tokens hitting the market. And if the demand long term doesn't grow as quickly as the supply, then the price has to go down. This is the minimum threshold of investor growth that Bittensor needs to hit. So supply will grow by a bit over 10% in the next 12 months. The total and maximum supply is 21 million. Currently, we've got 10.8 million circulating. Now let's compare Bittensor with the rest of the altcoin market. I always like to look at relative valuations. How does an altcoin do relative to everything else? Because there's all of this correlation within crypto. When Bitcoin goes up, when Ethereum goes up, many altcoins go up as well. When the market in general is going down, then many altcoins go down as well. So really what matters for the individual decision for or against an altcoin is its relative performance. Is it doing better or worse compared to the rest of the market? This is Bittensor relative to the others market cap. The others market cap is the market cap of all of the altcoins that are not in the top 10, and Bittensor is one of those altcoins. We can see how long term Bittensor did not outperform. Even with the recent rally, we have seen it underperform the rest of the altcoin market by 16%. Again, I think this is partially due to the tokenomics. But we can also compare Bittensor with Bitcoin. And here's something that I say very often on this channel. Most altcoins tend to underperform Bitcoin long term. There are a few altcoins that have these massive rallies that have to be timed well, because again, very often for many altcoin projects, the early investors and the market makers and the team, they get more and more token allocation over time, and they tend to sell over time. And that selling pressure very often for most altcoins can't withstand the general market dynamics of Bitcoin. Bitcoin has very healthy tokenomics. Most altcoins do not have that. Now the rally from the bottom to the top is roughly 100%, and so the crash from the top to the bottom is 50%. But maybe there's a way to time this in a quantitative way. Maybe it makes sense to buy into Bittensor when it's outperforming relative to Bitcoin, and to sell Bittensor when it underperforms relative to Bitcoin. Here we've got a moving average, but this moving average is just randomly chosen. It's now the 70-day simple moving average. Is that really the best? The answer is no. But in this video, we're going to crunch the numbers. We're going to find out what's the best way to time Bittensor relative to Bitcoin. Because again, we want to look at relative performance. When we are in a bear market, everything is going down at the same time. But if an asset can at least outperform Bitcoin over a certain period of time, it might make sense to cycle into that asset. And so here's the backtest result. I've run a simulation of buying and selling Bittensor relative to Bitcoin, and pretty much every one of those moving averages outperformed just buying and holding, right? I backtested all the moving average durations from the 2-day up to the 200-day, and it all did better than just buying and holding, which is this dotted line. Bittensor underperformed Bitcoin, right? So the dotted line is below zero. And especially between 2 and 50 days, we tend to see most gains. The best simple moving average is the 16-day simple moving average. This is now going long and cash. And here are the exact numbers. Buying and holding TAO over Bitcoin was not great. Timing the market though was great. That more than doubled our capital every single year. The maximum drawdown, instead of being 83%, is only 52%. The maximum drawdown duration, instead of being more than 2 years, is only around 1 year. And so that's then how that looks like on a chart, right? We want to be in Bittensor when we are above the moving average. We want to be in Bitcoin when we are below the moving average. So this is a simple rebalancing strategy. Currently, we are above the moving average. And this is then how that looks like over time. So we've got Bittensor Bittensor relative to Bitcoin in the chart at the bottom. We've got our equity chart in blue. We've got Bittensor relative to Bitcoin here in gray. And we can see how the line is sideways every now and then. That's when we are quote unquote in cash. So in this particular instance, since we are looking at Bittensor relative to Bitcoin, we are moving back to our benchmark to Bitcoin instead of being exposed to Bittensor. At the bottom, we see how the strategy outperforms just buying and holding TAO versus Bitcoin. So that's how much we do better compared to just having a fixed allocation towards Bitcoin and Bittensor without rebalancing. And so we can see quite nicely from this chart that timing the market just on the 16-day moving average works very well for TAO. The gains are quite consistent. Now this is the back test of being either in Bittensor or in Bitcoin. But we can increase the risk and also the return a bit. Instead of just toggling between Bittensor and Bitcoin, we could go long one asset and short the other asset at the same time. So in other words, we are betting on rising prices of Bittensor when we are above, and at the same time on falling prices of Bitcoin, and vice versa. When we are below the moving average, we bet on falling prices of Bittensor and rising prices of Bitcoin. So we add more price dynamic to the strategy. And then instead of getting a bit over 100% annualized, this chart turns into this chart. We get more than 200% APY. But we can also see how this increases our risk quite a bit. There are a few back tests now, a few moving averages where we're doing worse compared to just buying and holding a mix of BTC and TAO. Again, have a look at the tail end and compare that to a simple portfolio of being either in TAO or in BTC. So it's more risk. There are a few cases where we do worse, but in the case where we do better, we're doing much, much better. So instead of getting our 103% APY, we get 220% APY. So this portfolio outperforms by more than 3x every single year. But we do get a higher drawdown over time, right? This time it's 71%, and the less risky strategy had a maximum drawdown of only 52%. And so that's then the portfolio development for the more risky strategy versus the slightly less risky strategy. The conclusion is the same. We are above the best moving average. We should rather be bullish on Bittensor and bearish on Bitcoin in comparison. But I don't really like to still buy Bittensor at this price, just based on this TA, right? Just based on that we've got a relatively stable support and also a relatively strong resistance. We have bounced off that resistance quite often, and we're getting very close to the resistance. And so I think it's best to rather try to find opportunities to bet on falling prices of TAO. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but the risk of a short, of betting on falling prices of TAO is relatively easy to manage. We can simply have a stop loss at around 10%, maybe with some security buffer, 15% above the current price for a potential gain of close to 50%. And so we could enter the short today, or we could wait until we really hit the resistance. We could even wait until we fall below the best moving average. That would be the safest of the approaches. But in general, I don't want to bet against the long-term trend. And the long-term trend again is that TAO tends to struggle versus BTC because of the token inflation. And because of that, I want to rather look for short opportunities, and we are getting very close to such an opportunity. Again, the best moving average is only 16 days. So maybe we just have to wait a week or two until we get very close to that moving average again. And then we get a confirmation that it makes sense to bet on falling prices. But that's currently, I think, the best way to approach the asset. That's also supported by the open interest, by the way. So how many bets are currently being made on Bittensor? There is always some positive correlation between the spot price of an asset and the amount of bets on that asset. When there's a lot of bets on an asset, the price tends to be inflated. When the amount of open interest goes down, the price tends to go down. And because open interest currently tends to be rather at the higher end, it's probably better to look for opportunities to sell or to even bet on falling prices. If you got some value out of this video, feel free to give it a like. It will help the channel grow. If it's your very first time here, feel free to also subscribe. I publish videos regularly. I also share my own trades in the premium membership. There's also the access to the backtesting tool that you've seen here in this video. You can backtest any asset. You can look at various indicators, not just moving averages. So feel free to check it out. There's also a 1-week money back guarantee for premium. See you next time on YouTube or see you on premium. Thanks for watching. Cheers.